How do you like this one? Washington 2, Boston 1, final score. Don't kill the messenger. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Mary Traversy, who is the Vice President of Mail for Canada Post, one of Titanic 100's Society's generous community supporters. And as you no doubt know, Canada Post recently issued 5 beautiful commemorative stamps featuring the amazing work of Halifax designers Dennis Page and Oliver Hill. Make her welcome. Mary.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It is an absolute honor for me to be here tonight representing Canada Post. C'est un honneur d'être ici pour commémorer le 100e anniversaire du naufrage du Titanic. Our mandate at Canada Post is to commemorate people and events of significance to Canada with our stamp program. And it is with much pride that we carefully select what we think are important subjects. We thought the story of the Titanic, and particularly the role that Atlantic Canadians played in this historic event, was the right subject for us to mark with stamps. The people of Halifax can be very proud of the way in which they responded to the call for help a century ago tonight and led the rescue and recovery efforts. We felt at Canada Post that it was important for Canadians to remember the role that Halifax played in this historic tragedy. There were also a number of postal workers aboard the Titanic, a connection that was not lost on us at Canada Post. In fact, the RMS designation in front of RMS Titanic stands for Royal Mail Ship, meaning the ship was contracted to carry mail. All 5 postal workers on board died that night 100 years ago. So once we decided that we should issue stamps to commemorate Titanic, we turned to Halifax for their design. Our beautiful Titanic stamps were designed by Dennis Page and Oliver Hill and illustrated by Mike Little, all of Halifax. And Dennis, Oliver, and Mike did a fabulous job. Their work is beautiful. So to commemorate the story of the Titanic, and particularly the bravery of the people of Halifax, we've issued 5 stamps. For Canada Post, the release of our Titanic stamps is a chance to honor the people of Halifax. It's a chance to remember an iconic moment in history and an opportunity to keep the memory alive for a new generation of Canadians. Thank you. Bonsoir. Merci.
Thank you, Mary. I would like now to introduce Mr. Andrew Murphy, who is chair of the Titanic 100 Society, and Mr. Ken Pinto, the Society's executive director. Together, these 2 gentlemen put together an amazing program of events to commemorate the sinking of the Titanic, including Titanic Immortal, a conference held on Monday of this past week at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography, the gathering earlier tonight, and the candlelight procession, which made its way from the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic to the Grand Parade, and this evening's Night of the Bells and special interfaith ceremony, which will take place at the Fairview Lawn Cemetery, and I hope you'll be able to join us for that at 3 o'clock tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Murphy and Ken Pinto.
Welcome tonight. It's great to see such a show of folks here at this commemoration. Halifax has always been there in the face of tragedy, always been there to help and to show our respects. And this is a great beginning of the night. Thank you.
Hi, Ken Pinto here. This started 4 years ago. November the 17th was our first meeting, 2008. This is all about communal connection with the Titanic. The Titanic is special. It doesn't fit in a box. It's not like Swissair or 9/11 or other disasters. There have been hundreds of sinkings before the Titanic and other hundreds of sinkings after the Titanic. But for some reason, we connect with the Titanic. It's the only ship everybody knows, as the phrase goes. And Halifax, by luck and kismet, is a major part of the Titanic story. We're probably the second most important Titanic city in the world after Belfast. So tonight, and this whole several events we've had, is basically about establishing finally us claiming and embracing our Titanic heritage of the most important oceanic anniversary of all time. And as the years go by, the next few years, we're planning to have a monument, major monument, a Titanic trail like the Five Fishermen, Marconi's house on Barrington Street, and perhaps there are approximately 40 HRM sites with Titanic connections. There'll be a Titanic trail. Another idea is having a major model at the airport, and finally refurbishing and sprucing up the graveyards. So thanks very much, and I'm sure you're all here. I'm glad you're all here, and I hope you have the next 3 hours are enjoyable. Thanks.
Enjoy the evening.
And thanks to those two gentlemen for all of their hard work and for taking care to ensure that this 100th anniversary celebration of the Titanic and its tragedy were planned with taste and respect. I'd now like to call on the Honorable Percy Paris, Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism, to say a few words on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia, followed by the Honorable Dave Wilson, Minister of Communities, Culture, and Heritage. Minister Paris and Minister Wilson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly an honor for me to be here this evening as the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism. 100 years ago tonight, the Titanic hit an iceberg. By 2:20 the next morning, the Titanic was gone. And in true Nova Scotia fashion, because of our nature and because of our heritage, we, Nova Scotians, responded. We responded as we would in any disaster. It's just our nature. The memories and the stories of the Titanic are numerous. There are reminders all around this city of the Titanic. What this event will do, besides paying homage to this very somber and tragic event, it allows us an opportunity to share with the world the role that Nova Scotia played in this tragic event. This is a true testimony of our nature and our heritage. I want to say on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia, what a large crowd we have here tonight, and I want to say thank you, because we are proud Nova Scotians.
Good evening. Bonsoir tout le monde. My name is David Wilson, the Minister of Communities, Culture, and Heritage. And on behalf of the Government of Nova Scotia, we want to give you a warm welcome to our fellow Nova Scotians, visitors, those from across Canada and around the world that are watching. And we all have been touched by the tragedy of the Titanic. And Nova Scotia has a strong connection with the Titanic story. 100 years ago, 2 cable ships left Halifax Harbor to support the recovery efforts of more than 1,500 victims who died that fateful night in the North Atlantic. 150 of the men, women, and children are buried and laid to rest here in Nova Scotia. And I think Nova Scotians are very welcoming, proud, and compassionate in times of distress and tragedy. In recent history, we know Nova Scotians have lent a hand in the Swissair disaster, in Hurricane Juan, and of course the days after 9/11. I'm sure that all of you will be reflecting tonight, as I will, on the Titanic, its crew and passengers, and the men and women who took part in the recovery operations so long ago. May you find a part of yourself woven into part of our history and our culture in tonight's event. Thank you. Merci.
Thanks to Minister Paris and to Minister Wilson for those words. We're going to have a few brief words now from John Lindsay, a member of the Titanic 100 Committee. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, George. Having worked with the committee these past 4 years and having tried so hard to bring the importance of this event to the city and then watching it happen. And this is a solemn night. This is a night in which we honor, as people have said, this terrible tragedy that not only changed us, it changed marine history. But tonight, I am phenomenally pleased to be a Haligonian and a Nova Scotian, because as Haligonians and Nova Scotians, 100 years ago, when tragedy called, we answered. We stepped up. And now 100 years since, we have continued, and tonight, once again, in the importance of maintaining this memory and of ensuring that the past is not repeated and that we continue to remember and to honor. We've done it again, and I want to say thank you to all of you who are here tonight.
You know, of course, we're about to be joined by the Jerry Seinfeld crowd pretty soon. Yeah, he's doing a concert up there tonight. When he lets out, let's drag him down and get him into our festivities here. Make him welcome, eh? Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy now this video from our presenting sponsor.
Segregated by social convention, Titanic's first-class passengers, in their tuxedos and evening gowns, lived in a different world than the third-class passengers several decks below, hoping to find prosperity and a new life in the new world. What they had in common, apart from a belief that they were traveling on the world's first unsinkable ship, was that most of them had not long to live. After leaving Southampton, England, Titanic made stops in France and Ireland before setting off for the maiden journey's ultimate destination, New York. 4 days into the crossing, and shortly before midnight, the largest ship in the world hit an iceberg.
I had just reached my berth when I heard a dull thud, like a collision. That's extraordinary, I thought, and went up to see. Upstairs, I met a friend who laughingly said we had struck an iceberg, and we went on deck, and the ice was falling on us. The passengers came on deck, some in pajamas and some in evening gowns. They were not yet much alarmed. I then for the first time saw she was listing, and that all the people were putting on life belts. And for the first time, it looked serious. I would not believe it, knowing that the Titanic was such a safe boat. Finally, I realized the seriousness of the thing. I went inside, threw off my dress suit, put on my warmest clothes, and my steward, a very nice fellow, helped me to put on my life preserver. I never saw him again.
Between passengers and crew, Titanic carried more than 2,200 people. Its lifeboats had room for less than half that number. Many passengers were skeptical about how much damage the ship had suffered. But while the ship's orchestra continued to play, crew members started loading women and children into lifeboats.
So it was a question as who was there in time to get into one of the all too few lifeboats. Well, they weren't launched very quickly.